My name is Dilan AlPasha, and I'm a Senior Development Manager at Airey Miller Partnership. In this particular episode, we're focusing on the skill shortage within sustainability-related roles in the sector. Before we meet our panelists, I wanted to provide some context. Studies show that 40% of total emissions come from the construction and the built environment. And yet, we're also aware that we're in a housing crisis. We need more, better quality and affordable homes. The housing and construction industry, therefore, has a really key role to play in tackling the climate crisis and working towards a more sustainable future. A report issued in 2021 by the Construction Industry Training Board estimates that energy efficiency measures means retraining and creating 350,000 new roles needed by 2028, which represents an increase of around 13% on the current size of the workforce. The climate emergency will be one of the biggest drivers of economic, political, and social change of our generation. And for housing and construction, the net zero emissions target is also a huge opportunity to drive change, both within the industry and in the wider world. It's a chance to increase diversity within the sector, opening ourselves up to new pools of talent and to improve the environments in which we work and the quality of the assets we build. I'm joined today by Ben Earl, Head of Partnerships and Sustainability at Abri Housing Association, and Karen Barke, Managing Consultant at Inner Circle Consulting. Karen, if I could start with you, could you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Hi Dylan, really nice to meet you. My name's Karen Barke. I work at Inner Circle Consulting as a managing consultant. I have spent the last 25 years working within the housing sector and spent most of my career working within local authority. So I worked with Hackney Council, Newham Council and Lewisham Council. And recently, so about 18 months ago, joined Inner Circle Consulting. And the work I do here is really kind of focused on working with our clients to find solutions to their housing and sustainability problems. Some of the examples of that is helping them to deliver housing in a sustainable, kind of high quality way, but also to look at sort of housing service transformation, given the amount of change within the housing sector, and also finding solutions to the housing crisis and kind of those prevention elements as well. The reason I got into housing in the first place is because I grew up in Newham in East London and saw the impact of poor and unstable and low quality housing and the kind of the impact that had on people's lives. So, my friends, my family, my community. And so being able to kind of work in the sector and help find the solutions to combat that is hugely motivating for me and really enjoy it and kind of want other people to kind of see how much that can really help you in your career as a way of driving impact.
Ben, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Dylan. Hi. So yes, I'm Ben. I bring 25 years experience of sustainability. Started out working to try and change policy, so working for politicians. Then I worked in the charitable sector for over 10 years, delivering practical projects on the ground, involving tree planting, for example, and getting communities engaged. And then I've been in the corporate sector ever since, working to try and inject change at scale across the UK. And I think it's that scale and then the link to the fact that housing is on the front line that has landed me a role at a housing association, because housing is absolutely where the challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss come together to affect people in the lives where they're living. And so for me, a sort of partnerships and sustainability role for a housing association is a really interesting role, which I'm currently engaged in.
I'm really interested in hearing about your perspectives on this topic, so let's get right into it. Ben, if I could start with you. In relation to the skill shortage in the housing sector, particularly around sustainability-related roles and skill sets, where do you think the challenges lie?
So having established that housing is on the front line of some of these big topics that we've got to try and tackle, for me, it splits into sort of three main areas. Firstly, you've got your kind of CEOs and the boards of organizations that are on the front line. It's that capability, understanding about their transformation role in this, because this is where leadership comes in. So we need to transform housing through the leadership of those top teams. They need to be showing that they understand the issue, that they are responding to the issue, and that they are personally committed to the issue. So at that level, that's really, really important. But clearly, you then need to transform your teams on the ground. And this is where a common understanding of the pressures and the problems needs to be engendered throughout to your teams. So at Abri, we've done quite a lot of carbon literacy training, which is basically a sort of short, it's 2.5 days, if you like, sessions where you sort of talk about the issues around climate change. And then you sort of make a personal commitment at the end, and you have that general understanding of what the issues are. That's really, really important. But again, a lot of organizations are rolling that out in a sort of voluntary way and again, that puts pressure on organizations with multiple challenges, and it allows key chunks of your workforce not to go through it because they are too busy to attend training like that. So I think you need to come up with a really effective way of addressing that. And then, of course, thirdly, you've got the overall skills shortage about where do we find the people to do particularly the upgrading of the homes themselves to turn them fit for the future, both in a climate world that is you're mitigating against some of these challenges, but you're also adapting as well. And that's the area that both at a UK government level, but also through society, we are not on the front foot about at the moment. If you think about, we've got like 25 million homes to upgrade in this country, having just recently gone through having a builder in my home, and just seeing the kind of level of engagement and how you talk quite complex things and try and get them to move to adopt new technologies in a certain way or apply things to make sure that the quality of the work is good, but they're also responding to the innovation that's coming. It says to me, we've got not only a huge crisis in terms of people that with the physical and the mental understanding of where we need to go, but then you've got to apply those skill changes to actually deploy it. So whether it's heat pumps or insulation or, heating systems, water efficiency, these key challenges are not understood by enough people. And there's certainly not that sort of skill set out there ready to deploy at scale. And we need to massively ramp that up.
I've got a bit of an overlap, I think, with some of what Ben's saying there as well. So I think on that skills point, I totally agree. So I think particularly around housing, we know that we've got these retrofit targets in order to kind of get our carbon emissions down. What we don't have is a skilled workforce or the labour to be able to carry out that work. And what that ultimately means is we won't achieve those targets. So
Absolutely.
unless we address those skills and kind of, increase kind of that capability, like within housing associations and within councils, we just simply won't be able to meet those targets, which will then impact on carbon emissions across the country. So housing is such a big emitter of carbon that you can't not address it. Really interestingly, we're carrying out some work at the moment with the London Homes Coalition, and that's a group of London housing associations, but also contractors and sort of technical specialists as well, alongside government stakeholders, to look at the skills that are needed both to kind of maintain our housing, build new housing, but also address retrofit as well. And what that is finding is that there is a significant shortage, as we all know, and particularly in certain trades. So we've got a really ageing workforce essentially in a lot of these areas, and particular trades are coming up to retirement age. So it's something that we haven't got a huge amount of time to address. So I think skills is a really big one. Equally, training. So actually, how do you make this as an attractive kind of training proposition for people to want to come forward for that kind of development opportunity? Again, this report starts to pick it up and look at kind of what that might mean. And I think the other thing is just making it feel like a good opportunity.
Yes.
The kind of, there's a real challenge about how people feel about the housing sector or about kind of working in this sector, sustainability. I think there's just a challenge about how do we make that attractive and get younger people in, and also kind of underrepresented groups who, it's bad when you look at those stats at the moment. So there's a real challenge. We're not kind of using that diverse pool of people that are out there. So I think there's a real challenge there about making it an appealing career and proposition.
But I think if you're a young person at the moment, you get quite passionate about the climate crisis. So actually, there is that opportunity to really tap into that and say, actually, if you really want to do something to actually make a difference here, this is an area you can go into. and feel proud, not just from the skills you'll learn, but also the effect it's going to have will deliver against the things you are currently saying is a real issue for you and for society.
Yeah, and I don't think we're quite cracking that. Actually,
No,
making that link between
we don't.
people who are really passionate
I
about,
think that's a great opportunity.
really kind of want to be involved in combating, and actually that they have got the opportunity to do it. There's a really good kind of set of skills that they can build, but also
Yeah,
career opportunities
yeah.
around that, and to be at the forefront of some of that as well, so they can kind of pave the way with some of that work as well. So I think trying to make that link for people, and going back to that point as well about also if it's in housing, like the impact you're just having on people's lives, not just from an environmental and sustainable sort of perspective, but also just fundamentally on the quality of somebody's life. You get to do that.
But I do think there's a kind of rebranding exercise needed for the professions because, if you're a plumber at the moment, how important are plumbers to all of our lives? But do we celebrate them enough, or do we give them the opportunity to innovate, for example? And I think there's great opportunities there.
So raising awareness, some training, and finding ways to attract more people to come to this industry.
Rebadging those trades as well. Make it much more innovative and sexy to go into.
Yeah.
I think that so this you've kind of both will be able to be kind of part of this work as well, is this building skills for the future report that's being launched next week, starts to look at that. So, and it's inviting people to come and work with that coalition as well. It's a very kind of open forum to try and do exactly what we're describing here. So I think that recognition, maybe new kind of government impetus that there might be following the end of this week around kind of this agenda, actually that might really help to get us cracking with this.
What are the potential solutions, Ben, to addressing this issue?
Well, I agree with everything Karen's just said. And I think for me, it's about how do you pull the levers to make this happen? So that on policy certainty comes then sort of political priority and politics with a small p, if you like, as well. So your organisation needs to be inspired, whether it be in the housing sector, but also all the supply chain, to actually drive a strategy that addresses some of this. So we need apprenticeships to be more widely taken up, and we need to have incentives for senior leadership within organisations to have this as a key KPI. Because without it, it's always going to be one of those add-ons to everything else that's going on. I mean, one thing that disappoints me about in the housing sector is we have lots of issues like damp and mold and, fire safety and stuff, which the industry is grappling with. And then you've got sustainability sort of alongside it, but some of which aren't intertwined. And so you're kind of looking at multiple delivery from the same pots. And it's like, the issue around our climate targets is the longer we leave it before we address these issues, the higher the temperatures will become. And so the higher the cost to the sector, but also the damage being done for our residents will continue. And I mentioned earlier on that we've got to look at climate adaptation as well as mitigation. And, so hotter summers are going to lead to much more overheating in homes, for example, but we are constantly failing to address overheating as a country going forward, and housing's again on the front lines. So it is complex because you're trying to deliver multiple things at the same time. But I think for me, the biggest lever is getting it as the priority, incentivizing the senior leadership to see it as a key KPI, and then driving those opportunities with government around things like apprenticeship levy and things like that to actually get the training address that we need for that workforce of the future.
So if you're going into people's homes and carrying out maintenance work, actually you should be in there doing all of the required work at the same time, so that the resident experience is a good one and they're not having repeat visits and they've got
More integrated approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the integration works like it's very sensible from just a planning perspective, but also from a resident's perspective, that's got to be the better option for them as well. And that's kind of much more important now in terms of the new legislation about resident satisfaction and resident experience. So I think it goes hand in hand with that.
Yeah. Needs more long-term thinking, doesn't it?
Well, as you say, alongside the practical work of actually physically doing something in a home or a flat, you've actually got to take the customer on a bit of a journey too. And I'm not sure we're doing that effectively enough as a sector at the moment. And it's probably because I'm not sure our workforce are kind of fully integrated with all the different elements because they don't understand it themselves. So how can they talk to customers about it? And that just reflects society. It's not necessarily a problem just in the housing sector. I think it's a problem for all businesses. Particularly the smaller the supply chain is a key challenge as well, because if you're a certain size business, then you've probably got the resources to be able to kind of handle some of these areas. But what about those smaller suppliers that are sort of just about surviving or managing? How do you take them on a journey with you?
So it's a bit about the technical skills, but also the sort of communication skills and how you relay that message to the customer.
Yes. I think, all of those brands that we can all recall in society that we think are doing a good job have managed to get some of that nicely combined. And that's what makes it a more of a simple message, if you like.
Ben, what sort of advice would you give employers looking to motivate their workforce, their staff, to get into sustainability related training, or to get people in the wider labor force to move into sustainability related roles?
I think it starts by painting a really positive future here, because I think we all have examples of where you've bought a new light bulb and it's not performed very well because it's a green one, and you're kind of thinking, oh, that's a bit naff. And you hear it about electric vehicles all the time, or you hear it about solar or whatever. These things aren't solving the problem. I think you've got to paint the picture that this is a positive world we're moving to with investment, and it's actually going to be really good for both green jobs and our lifestyles, as well as there's opportunities to get a green buck out of it as well. And I think if we got that positive message across, that's the first point. Having done that and sold the vision, because most organizations have a sustainability strategy, but it's my job to turn that sustainability strategy from a series of pages to actually bring it to life. And it's at that point things fall down, because you need that real positivity from the directors and the sort of the higher up of each business. But then you need to drive through those changes in terms of the culture. And for us at Abri, it starts from the day someone joins the organization. We've now embedded sustainability into our induction program. So we actually have it as a key module. And what all of our new recruits or joiners do is they actually analyze our strategy and then look at what we're doing as an organization and present back to their fellow peers what they've discovered. And then we usually sit in that session and we can then have a conversation. And what I always do, because I think it's the way to do it, is to bring it back to their home and their family, because we all pay an energy bill, we all pay a water bill, we all live in a house. Sometimes it's too hot, sometimes it's too cold. We all have these issues, and it's about explaining where all the interrelated issues are, and the fact that a housing association is doing at scale what you're managing in your own budgets at home. And I think it starts there. And then we've also now introduced a new housing professional of the future sort of training package for our staff. So people go through a real understanding of where social housing started and why it's important. And it's all about trying to get more understanding to help enable us to have the staff of the future. And sustainability is a key module within it, because once again, it's fully integrated. So I think it is possible, but you've got to work quite hard on getting those sort of different steps of the ladder to get to where you want to be. And then you need to back it up with that positive cultural change for people to see that those managers and those heads of and those directors are actually putting PV on their roof, or are actually perhaps taking less car journeys or whatever, and seeing that change. Because if people hear, we've got to do this, but I'm going to carry on doing this, that's a real problem, I think.
You got to lead by example.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I really, really agree with what Ben's saying. I think there's kind of that vision point is key. So actually being able to kind of really inspire people through that vision and kind of setting out where you're trying to get to and making that feel tangible. But again, relating it back to what is your role. like what part are you playing in your job and through your skills in contributing to that? So seeing your part in achieving that is really key, because that can be
Absolutely.
fantastic as a kind of like an inspiring point, but knowing that you're contributing. And I think that is where strong leaders can have a real impact, is kind of making that point, really setting that vision, but making it relatable, as you said, to an individual and the job that they're doing. So the huge power in that, I think.
Because everybody's role can play an impact on this really important
Absolutely. And I think
point.
you're right about kind of that individual thing actually as well. It's like, actually, you know that in your own home, you know, your own family, your own community, what the challenges are, and that you can make a difference through your actions at work to solve that for people. That's incredibly inspiring if you can make it feel like that to people.
We touched on diversity earlier on and on representation in the workforce. Karen, why do you think representation in the housing sector, particularly when it comes to sustainability related roles, is so important? And how can it help us address the skill shortage?
I think it's vital. I think that there's a real recognition that there is underrepresentation within the workforce, and it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. I think representation is really important. Being able to kind of see somebody doing the job that you might aspire to do or working in your community is really important. I know it was for me, seeing women working in kind of housing and development when I was younger, and encouraged me to carry on working in the sector and realise there were opportunities. So representation is key. There's also a skills point here, is that whilst we're not kind of accessing like and talking to everybody and kind of having that diverse approach, we're keeping the talent pool really small. So actually, by opening up and making sure we are having those conversations with everybody, attracting kind of a diverse range of people to come into the sector, that that pool of talent is just much greater that we can then work with. So huge opportunity there to do a better job, bring diversity of kind of insight and innovation, but also to address the skills shortage as well.
Ben, why do you think more representation and a focus on diversity is important in the housing sector?
I think people will relate to other people like them. So if there's predominantly a male workforce when it comes to sort of the trades, if you like. I mean, I've had a heat pump installed recently in my home, and one of the technicians was female, and it was quite a positive thing. I recognised having someone like that in my home working alongside the team to deliver the new heat pump. But actually, it shouldn't be that unusual, but it is. And I think one of the other things that happens is sustainability is often talked about at the sort of that middle manager level within organizations, and we've got to get conversations around some of these things happening at all levels of an organization. And then lastly, I mean, issues around, say, something like water efficiency. Having worked in the water industry for a number of years, it's very, very interesting when you look at the cultural differences of use of water. So some cultures will ritualistically use water, which of course adds to their daily per capita consumption. And of course, if you don't take those kind of factors into account, when it then comes to sort of messages and campaigns around water efficiency, if you're not actually recognizing the differences, then you actually miss out on engaging huge sectors of society.
I really agree with that point. Sort of the different perspectives that you get from having a much wider and diverse workforce is key. There is like you can't tackle the
No.
problems in an innovative way unless you have got that broad understanding.
Absolutely.
So we just won't be doing the job well enough unless we are able to have a diverse workforce.
This has been a really fascinating conversation, but I just wanted to end with some of your final thoughts. What sort of advice would you give to leaders wanting to make a serious change in their workforce when it comes to sustainability?
So for me, it's be brave and get on the front foot, and also add some real sort of urgency to what you're planning, and make sure that you take that plunge, if you like, and actually really drive it through the organization, so that we can get both the training and the needs fulfilled, but also the staff are passionate about following it and actually going down that road, or else it just becomes a diktat that everyone ignores.
I agree. I think you've said it really well there, Ben. I think be bold. Now is time action is needed. We know what problems are, and we've got an idea of how to
Absolutely.
tackle them. So we're able to do it. So I think it's about being bold and collaborating across the sector to actually solve those problems and tackle them.
A fantastic conversation with Ben and Karen. Couple of key takeaways from our conversation. We need bold leaders who want to drive change, leading by example, and setting ambitious targets for themselves and their teams. And finally, knowledge is power. Invest in sustainability related training for yourself and your team.